Don't revive her again. Just let the paperwork run its course. The voice belonged to my stepmother. I recognized it before I recognized anything else, before the beeping of the monitor, before the pressure of the ventilator pushing air into my chest in a rhythm I had not chosen, before the smell of iodine and floor wax and something floral that had no business being in an ICU. Renata's voice arrived first. Flat and steady, the voice of a woman reading from a list she had already prepared. Her name is Clara Voss. She is 29 years old, and the voice at the foot of her bed belonged to her stepmother. I could not open my eyes. My arms would not lift. My tongue felt 3 sizes too large for my mouth. But I was awake in the specific, terrifying way of a person who has been locked inside their own body and is only now beginning to understand the dimensions of the room. My stepsister's voice came next, quieter, positioned somewhere near the window. What about her husband? Renata did not hesitate. Marcus signed nothing. I have the directive. My fingers were curled against the sheet. I kept them still. I kept everything still. Because somewhere below the fear, below the ventilator and the beeping and the floral smell that did not belong, a part of my brain was already doing the only calculation that mattered. They think I am gone. That is the only advantage I have. Don't waste it. That was Monday, 6 days before my 30th birthday, and I was not supposed to be awake to hear it. What I want to tell you first, before the lawyer's office and the deed and the 51 missed calls, is what my father built, and what his wife discovered in a manila folder, and why those 2 things together made my life worth more to her ended than continued. Not the accident, not the mountain road and the failing brakes and the guardrail coming at me like a silver wall. Before all of that, I want to tell you about my father, about the trust he built in my mother's name, about the woman he married when I was 17, who made his soup for 11 years and drove him to every oncology appointment and slept on a cot beside his hospital bed for the last 3 months of his life. And about the number she discovered in a manila folder. A number that made my life, at 29 years old, worth more to her ended than continued. My father, Douglas Voss, was a careful man. He did not make impulsive decisions. He did not leave things to chance. When my mother died, I was 9, a car accident, a highway in February. He did not spend her life insurance money. He invested it. He watched it grow for 18 years with the patient attention of a man who understood that the most important things take time. He set it in a trust. Distribution date, my 30th birthday. He told me about it twice. Once when I was 21 and once 4 months before he died, sitting in the bedroom that smelled like eucalyptus oil and the oak dresser that had been there since before I was born. His hand on the edge of the bed, thin, warm, the raised veins of a man who had been ill for a long time. This is your mother's money, Clara, he said. Your real mother's. Nobody touches it until you turn 30. That's how I built it. I did not ask what would happen if I died before 30. It did not occur to me to ask. I was 29, healthy, married to Marcus, who called me every Tuesday from whatever job site he was running, without fail, because he said texting felt like leaving a note on someone's door instead of knocking. I was working from our spare bedroom designing logos for small businesses who wanted something classy but had modest budgets and strong opinions. Death before 30 was not on my list of concerns. But Douglas had thought about it. Douglas thought about everything. And somewhere in the trust documents, in language I had never read, in a clause I had never considered, was a provision that said, if the beneficiary dies before the distribution date, the trust reverts to the grantor's estate. Renata was the sole heir of that estate. She had known about the clause. I understood this later, understood that she had known about it for years, possibly before my father died, possibly while she was still driving him to oncology appointments in her sedan with the cracked dashboard. still organizing his pills in the weekly tray with the little blue lids. To my father, my mother's money was sacred. To Renata, those same words, your real mother's money, must have sounded like a locked door she had been standing in front of for 11 years. My phone rang at 7:15 on a Saturday morning. I was standing at the kitchen window in Marcus's old college sweatshirt, watering the basil plant on the sill. The basil was leggy. I had been meaning to pinch it back for weeks. Renata's voice was cheerful when she called, which should have been the first signal. Renata did not do cheerful without a reason. Clara, honey, your sister misses you. The cabin could use some help with the gutters. Wouldn't it be nice to come up, just the girls? I said yes. I should not have said yes. But I was still carrying guilt about not visiting more since the funeral, and guilt, when it has been sitting long enough, makes you say yes to almost anything that sounds like repair. I left at 8. The brakes felt soft around mile marker 42. I pumped them twice. The pedal caught, then released. The guardrail came at me like a silver wall. I remember the sound, metal on metal, a grinding shriek. I remember the windshield going white. I remember a thought that arrived with complete and ridiculous clarity in the final second before everything stopped. I didn't water my basil plant this morning. Then nothing for 3 days. Until the beeping, until the ventilator, until Renata's voice at the foot of my bed, steady as a weather forecast, saying the 4 words that brought me fully, terrifyingly back. Just let the paperwork run its course. I kept my fingers still. I kept my eyes shut. I began, in the dark behind my sealed eyelids, to count. Before I go further, if you have ever woken up to find that someone you trusted had been making decisions about your life without you, leave me a comment and tell me where you are watching from. I read every single one. Because what happened in that hospital room across the next 6 days, what a night shift nurse named Marion Salas wrote in a notebook she carried in her scrub pocket, I have never told in full until right now. Stay with me. The number was $4,200,000. I heard it on day 2, in the voice of a woman who had driven my father to chemotherapy for 3 years and organized his medications with the precision of a pharmacist and slept on a cot beside his hospital bed without complaint. Renata's voice, low and directed, the voice she used when she was calculating something she did not want overheard. I had known about the trust in a general way. My father had mentioned it twice. What I had not known, what I lay in that hospital bed learning for the first time, was the specific shape of what happened to it if I did not reach my 30th birthday. She's 29, my stepsister Nadia said. 6 days. Renata's voice was controlled, the words placed with the care of someone who had been organizing this particular thought for a long time. 6 days and she turns 30. Every cent goes to her. But if she doesn't make it to 30, the trust reverts to Douglas's estate. A pause. Which comes to me. I lay perfectly still. The ventilator pushed air into my chest. The monitor beeped every 4 seconds. The manila folder Renata had brought sat on the bedside table 3 inches from my hand. Its clasp clicked shut. Its contents already read, already understood, already converted into a timeline. 6 days. That was the length of my life as Renata had calculated it. My father had built that trust from my mother's life insurance money. $2 million, invested for 18 years, grown to just over $4 million. He had set the distribution date as my 30th birthday with the specific intention that no one could touch it before then. Not Renata, not Nadia, not anyone. He had told me once, sitting in the bedroom that smelled of eucalyptus oil, his hand on mine, the oxygen cannula looped behind his ears. This is your mother's money, Clara. I set it up so it releases on your birthday, not a day sooner. Nobody can touch it. He had not told me what the reversion clause said. He had not needed to. He had assumed I would be alive. He had not assumed Renata would be the one sitting beside my hospital bed with a manila folder and a deadline. The first time Marian Salas came into my room, I did not know she would save my life. She came at 11:47 at night. I know the time because she said it aloud the way nurses do when logging vitals. 11:47. Checking lines, room 412. Her voice was different from the daytime nurses, lower, unhurried, with the steadiness of someone who has done something 10,000 times and has stopped performing it and simply does it. Renata and Nadia had left hours earlier. The room was dark except for the blue glow of the monitors and the thin line of light under the door from the hallway. Marian talked to me, not because she thought I could hear her, at least not that first night. "All right, sweetheart, let's check your lines." Her hands were warm and dry, smelling of betadine soap. That sharp, amber scent that every hospital worker carries. She adjusted the IV drip, checked the ventilator connections, pressed 2 fingers to my wrist for the pulse point. Then she did something that would matter more than she knew. She took a small notebook from her scrub pocket and wrote something in it. Not the hospital chart, her own notebook. I found out later that she kept one for every shift. Timestamps, observations, small details the official record did not capture. Patterns. The kind of things you notice after 23 years of watching patients in the dark when no one else is looking. She clicked the pen, slipped the notebook back into her pocket. "You hang in there, sweetheart." Her sneakers squeaked softly on the linoleum. Then she was gone. I did not know yet that the notebook in her scrub pocket would become the most important document in my life. I only knew that her hands were warm and that she had spoken to me as though I might be listening. Renata's hands were cold. They had always been cold. Earlier that day, she had pressed her fingers to my forearm with the specific pressure of someone checking a temperature, not checking whether I was warm, but whether I was still warm. The difference is small. It is not a small difference. Day 2, morning. Renata and Nadia arrived together at 9. I heard the chair legs scrape the floor, the crack of a soda can, the faint scratch of Nadia's thumbnail against her phone case. They sat in silence for a few minutes. Then Renata spoke, barely above a whisper, the voice she used when the door was closed and no one official was listening. The mechanic did exactly what I asked. My heart rate spiked. I felt it, a surge in my chest, fast and hot, the monitor beeping faster than its 4-second rhythm. 2 seconds between beeps. 3. "Mom," Nadia's voice was sharp, the machine. They both went silent. I counted backward from 10, forced my breathing into the ventilator's rhythm. In, out, the beeping slowed, settled. "Machines do that," Renata said. "The nurse said it's normal." A pause. Then Nadia, quieter. "You said it was just the brakes failing. You told me the brakes failed on their own." They did fail. Renata's voice was flat. I just helped them fail. The mechanic loosened the brake line. Mountain road, steep grade, no guardrail on the first curve. The car does the rest. I lay still. Sweat had started at the back of my neck, sliding against the hospital pillow. My stepmother had sabotaged my brakes. She had sent me up that mountain road alone, knowing the line would give out on the first curve, knowing I would go through the guardrail or into the trees. She was sitting close enough for me to smell her hand cream, something floral, lavender, describing what she had done in the same tone she used to discuss a recipe. 4 words. I just helped them fail. She had planned it. She had paid someone. And I was not supposed to be awake to hear it. Every muscle in my body wanted to move. Every nerve, every reflex, everything evolution had spent 1,000,000 years building into the human body for exactly this moment. It all screamed the same word. Move. The part of my brain that had kept me still for 2 days said something quieter. Not yet. I opened my hands slowly under the sheet. I closed them. I breathed. 6 days. Marion would be back at 11:47. I had, until then, to figure out how to tell her. Marcus was not overseas. I learned this on day 2, through a door left open 4 inches, enough for Renata's voice to carry from the hallway into room 412 while I lay still and the ventilator did its work. Yes, her husband is on a construction project. He's been difficult to reach. A pause. No, I'm her designated decision maker. I have the healthcare directive right here. The daytime nurse murmured something agreeable. I'd prefer we limit visitors, Renata continued. The doctors say stimulation could set back her recovery. No calls to the room. No outside visitors without my approval. Marcus was 40 minutes away. I understood this later, assembled it piece by piece from what people told me after. He was on a job site in Harmon County, probably eating a gas station sandwich, probably checking his phone for a text from me that was not coming. Renata had called him the evening I was admitted. She had used words like protocol and observation period, and the medical team recommends words official enough to make a worried husband hesitate. She had told him I was stable, resting, that visitors would only complicate the process. Marcus trusted her. Why wouldn't he? She had made my father's soup for 11 years. She had held my hand at the funeral. She had a manila folder full of documents that said she was in charge. He thought I was resting. My stepmother had made sure of that. The healthcare directive. I had signed it at 23, unmarried, fresh out of design school. My father had handed me the pen across the kitchen table and explained it simply. If something happened to me, he wanted someone he trusted to make medical decisions on my behalf. Renata was the closest thing I had to a mother. I signed without reading past the first page. I should have read past the first page. What I did not know, what I would not know until much later, was that the document Renata had given the hospital was not the document I had signed. The original was 3 pages. The version in her manila folder had 4. The 4th page contained a specific clause, authorizing the healthcare agent to direct withdrawal of life-sustaining measures, including mechanical ventilation, in the event the patient is determined to be in a persistent vegetative state. My signature was at the bottom of that page. It was not my signature. But I did not know any of this yet. I only knew that the woman who had the directive was using it to keep my husband away and my doctors compliant, and that somewhere outside this room Marcus was waiting for a call that Renata had made sure would never come. I thought about Tuesdays. Marcus and I had a thing about Tuesdays. It started when we were dating. He was on a construction crew, long days, early starts, but every Tuesday at noon, no matter what he called. Not texted. Called. He said texting felt like leaving a note on someone's door instead of knocking. The last Tuesday before the accident, he had asked if I wanted company on the drive up. I said no. I said I would call when I got there. I always did. Lying in that bed, I kept returning to that conversation. The specific weight of an ordinary exchange that had no idea it was the last one. If I had said yes, if I had let him come. I did not have time for if. I had 6 days. 5 now. And somewhere in the hospital, a night shift nurse named Marion Salas was working her way toward room 412. Day 3, morning. Renata caught Dr. Hale outside my room. The door was open 6 inches, enough to hear everything if I held my breath and let the ventilator do its work. Dr. Hale, I need to discuss the timeline. Renata's voice was measured, polite, with an undercurrent that I recognized from years of watching her manage my father's care. She has been in a coma for 3 days. The EEG shows minimal brain activity. I have the advanced directive authorizing withdrawal of life-sustaining treatment. Dr. Hale spoke slowly. He had the kind of voice that carried weight without volume. Mrs. Voss, I understand your position and I respect the directive, but hospital protocol requires 72 additional hours of observation before we can proceed with any withdrawal of life support. 72 hours. Renata's composure slipped for half a second. That's almost past her. Past her what, Mrs. Voss? A beat, 2 beats. Past what I can handle. Emotionally. I need closure, doctor. I've been here every day. Hale did not respond immediately. The pause was deliberate, long enough to communicate something without saying it directly. 72 hours is standard protocol. I'll schedule the evaluation for Thursday morning. Thursday morning. My birthday was Thursday. 72 hours from Wednesday was Thursday at dawn. If Hale ran his evaluation at 8 in the morning, the trust would have already distributed at midnight. Renata would lose everything. I heard her heels begin packing in the hallway. 3 steps, pivot, 3 steps back. The sound of a person doing arithmetic in her head and not liking the answer. Is there any way to expedite? A second opinion, a transfer. A transfer would reset the observation clock, Hale said. The packing stopped. I heard her exhale, sharp, controlled, the sound of someone swallowing something that should not be swallowed in a hospital hallway. 72 hours. That was all I had, but it was something. That night, I started testing my body. Between 2 and 6 in the morning was the safest window. Renata and Nadia gone, the daytime nurses not yet arrived, Marion completing her rounds and then moving to other rooms on the floor. I used those hours the way a person uses whatever tools are available. Carefully, without wasting anything. I started with my toes, right foot first. A curl, a flex, a release, deep electric pain running from ankle to hip. But it happened. Voluntary movement. Then my fingers. My left hand was stronger than my right. The IV was in my right arm and the tape restricted me. I practiced making a fist under the sheet. Open, close, open, close. My voice was the biggest problem. I tried to whisper once in the dark, and what came out was less than a whisper. A hiss of air with no shape to it. The vocal cords would not cooperate. Whatever the ventilator tube had done to them, or the swelling, or the neurological confusion of 5 days without conscious use, the voice was gone. But the fingers worked. The left index finger, specifically. I focused on it the way you focus on a single thread when you are trying to unravel something, not the whole knot, just this one strand. I had no phone, no voice, no way to sit up or write or call for help. What I had was the knowledge that Marion Salas came at 11:47, and 2 and 6, and that her hands were warm, and that she talked to unconscious patients, because 23 years of nursing had taught her that you never knew who was listening. I was listening. I was awake, and counting every minute Renata was gone. On the 3rd night, at 2:14 in the morning, Marion lifted my left hand to check the pulse point at my wrist. My index finger twitched. Not planned, not strategic. A contraction of one small muscle, barely a movement at all. But Marion's hand stilled. Her breathing changed. She did not let go. Tori, she said a name that was not mine. I understood later she had misread the chart. Then, correcting, Clara, can you hear me? I concentrated everything I had into the index finger of my left hand. A deliberate flex. Small, unmistakable. Donna Marion did not gasp, did not rush out. She stood holding my hand, and I felt her thumb press gently against my knuckle. A single, brief, professional squeeze. Then she reached into her scrub pocket. I heard the click of a pen, the scratch of writing. 2:14 a.m. responsive finger flex, left hand. Voluntary. 2 instances. Patient may have awareness. She paused. I felt her look toward the door. Then the notebook went back into her pocket. You hang in there, sweetheart. Barely a breath. Her sneakers squeaked down the hallway. In the dark, I curled my fingers into the sheet and held on. Night 4, 10 o'clock. Marion closed the door all the way this time. I heard the latch click, a small sound, deliberate, different from every previous visit. She pulled the vinyl chair close to the bed. The legs scraped once, then settled. "Clara," her voice was quiet and direct. No warmth performance, just clarity. "I'm going to ask you questions. If you can hear me, squeeze my finger once for yes." She placed her index finger in my left palm. I squeezed, one deliberate contraction. "Good," twice for no. She worked through it methodically. The 23 years of nursing present in the precision of each question. Nothing wasted, nothing repeated. "Are you in pain?" One squeeze. "Can you open your eyes?" Two squeezes. "Is there someone you want me to call?" One squeeze, immediate, hard as I could manage. "Your husband." One squeeze. "Is his number in your phone?" Two squeezes. My phone was gone. Renata had taken it from the accident scene or from my bag at intake. It was not in this room. I did not know where it was. I knew only that it was not here and that without it I had no way to reach Marcus directly. Marian was quiet for a moment. I heard her breathing, steady, deliberate, the breathing of someone making a decision they cannot unmake once made. "Listen carefully." She leaned closer. Her voice dropped to barely audible. "I've been a nurse for 23 years. Most families who come through here are frightened and grieving and doing their best. But some of them," she paused. "I don't know your stepmother, but whoever told this hospital your husband is overseas, I don't believe that's true. The way she talks about withdrawal, the urgency of it, the visitor restrictions, something is wrong." I squeezed her finger. Hard. As hard as my left hand could manage at that point, which was not very hard but was everything I had. "I'm going to find your husband," Marian said. "You were admitted here 2 years ago for a wrist fracture. There should be an emergency contact on file from that visit. I'll use those records." She paused. "But you need to do something for me. Stay still. Don't let anyone know you're conscious. Not the day nurses. Not Dr. Hale. Not anyone who might mention it to your stepmother. Can you do that?" One squeeze. "Good." She patted my hand once. Professional, warm, final. Then she stood, opened the door, and the hallway light cut a thin rectangle across the floor. Her sneakers squeaked softly down the corridor. For the first time in 4 days, I felt something other than fear. The afternoon of day 2, Renata had left to meet with Dr. Hale. Her heels clicked down the hallway and faded. The door stayed open. Nadia stayed behind. "I want to tell you about Nadia, because she was not Renata. She was 26 years old. With student loans she could not service and a business degree that had not produced the career the brochures promised. She wore vanilla oat milk perfume that she had worn since college. She scratched her thumbnail against her phone case when she was anxious, which was often. She was not a good person in that hospital room, but she was not Renata either. After her mother left, Nadia moved closer. The vinyl chair creaked. Her perfume arrived before her voice did. "Clara," barely a whisper, "I didn't want this." She paused. I heard a sniffle, the sound of someone wiping their face with the back of their hand. "Mom said it was the only way. She said you'd never even know. She said the accident would look like brakes just fail on mountain roads, right? She said it happens." Nadia's voice cracked. "I just didn't think she'd actually do it. I thought she was talking. You know how she talks." I knew how Renata talked. She talked about things the way she managed pill schedules, with precision and follow-through. She did not say things she did not intend. "Your dad left you everything," Nadia continued. Her voice was rising, tangled with tears and something that sounded almost like anger, not at me, at the arrangement, at the specific way the numbers had landed. "Mom got the house. And the house isn't nothing, but there's no cash. The medical bills ate everything that wasn't in the trust. Do you know what it's like watching your mom clip coupons at 53, with kitchen scissors because she can't afford the app?" A breath. I owe $84,000 in student loans. I live at home. My boyfriend left in February. She exhaled hard. I'm sorry, Clara. I really am. Then I heard her take out her phone. Her thumbnail tapped the screen. One text, quick, 3 words. I did not know what it said until later. How much longer? She stood up, walked to the window. I heard the blinds open and afternoon light shifted across my closed eyelids, warm and gold, and entirely indifferent to what it was illuminating. That night in the dark, I thought about Nadia's 3 words. Not with sympathy, not yet. I was not in a position for sympathy. But I filed them carefully, the way you file something you will need to understand later when you have more time and more information, and are not lying in a hospital bed counting the seconds between your stepmother's visits. How much longer? She had not asked whether I would survive. She had asked how long until I wouldn't. That was the shape of what I was dealing with. Not cruelty, exactly. Something colder than cruelty. The arithmetic of people who have decided that your death is a solution to a problem that is genuinely pressing. Student loans. Coupons clipped with kitchen scissors. A mother who had spent 11 years managing a dying man's care and received, at the end of it, a house with no liquidity and a trust she could not touch. I understood the math. Understanding it did not make me more willing to be its answer. I curled my left hand under the sheet. I practiced the flex, index finger, deliberate, controlled. I counted the hours until Marion's next check. Outside the hospital on a construction site in Harmon County, Marcus was eating a gas station sandwich and checking his phone for a message that was not coming, not knowing that tomorrow at noon on a Tuesday he would get a call instead. Not from me. From a night shift nurse with a notebook in her scrub pocket and 23 years of watching things that did not add up. I held on. 4 days down, 2 to go. The Thursday clock was running, and I was still counting. Wednesday morning, day 5. Renata arrived at 7, earlier than usual. I heard her before she reached the room, her voice clipped and low in the hallway, already on the phone. I need the order signed today. Not tomorrow, today. A pause. Wednesday evening. Yes, I'll come to the courthouse myself if necessary. Another pause, longer. Every day we wait is another day she suffers. That's what I'll tell the judge. Compassionate withdrawal. She said the word compassionate the way you pick up a tool, use it, and set it back down. A word with no relationship to the feeling it described. A word chosen because it worked on judges the way protocol worked on worried husbands. She ended the call and came into the room. Nadia arrived minutes later, the vanilla oat milk, the phone case scratch, the soda can. They did not greet me. They never did. The room was a room with a body in it, and I was the body. The lawyer says we can get a court order by tonight, Renata told Nadia. Emergency hearing. Compassionate grounds. The judge has agreed. Nadia's voice was thin. Tonight means we come back with the order. Dr. Hale has to comply. Withdrawal begins before midnight. A silence settled over the room. I heard Nadia shift in the chair. Thursday morning is her birthday. I know what day it is, Nadia. The words landed the way stones land in still water, without drama, without remorse. The ripples moved through the room, and then the room went quiet again, and the monitor beeped its 4-second rhythm, and the ventilator pushed air into my chest, and my stepmother sat 3 feet from my face planning to have me dead before the clock struck 12. Wednesday night, that was the new deadline. Not 72 hours, tonight. I had maybe 12 hours. Marion had maybe 12 hours. And somewhere across town, on a construction site in Harmon County, it was Tuesday. Marcus called every Tuesday at noon. He had not missed a Tuesday in 4 years. Marion found the number during her lunch break. She told me this later, sitting beside me in a different kind of room when I could finally ask. She had gone to the nurse's break room at 12:15, the only window not monitored by the charge nurse on the day's shift, and pulled my records from 2 years prior. A wrist fracture, November, room 219. Emergency contact, Marcus Voss. Harmon County construction site, mobile number. She called from the break room landline. He picked up on the second ring. He always did on Tuesdays. The conversation lasted 4 minutes. Marion spoke first. Mr. Voss, my name is Marion Salas. I'm a registered nurse at Ridgeview Medical Center. Your wife Clara is in the ICU. She has been here since Saturday. Silence, then his voice coming apart at the edges. What do you mean she's in the ICU? Her stepmother called me. She said Clara was stable, resting. She said the doctors recommended no visitors. Sir, who told you that? Renata Voss. She called me Saturday night. She said he stopped. Marion heard him breathing hard. She said there was nothing to worry about. Marion waited. Is my wife alive? She's alive, Marion said, and she's awake. The silence that followed was the silence of a man reassembling everything he thought he understood about the past 5 days. Marion let it sit. She told me later she could feel the anger building on the other end of the line, the way you feel weather before you see clouds. I'm coming, Marcus said. Don't come to the front desk. Her stepmother has restricted visitor access. Come to the east entrance, 4th floor, after 10 tonight. I'll meet you at the stairwell. Is she, his voice caught, is she okay? Marion paused. Then carefully she squeezed my hand. Mr. Voss twice. 3 seconds of silence. I'll be there. Marion told me about those 3 seconds later. She said she had never heard so much packed into so little. The sound of a man deciding that whatever was on his job site could wait, that whatever his truck needed could wait, that the only thing in the world that could not wait was the east entrance of Ridgeview Medical Center at 10 o'clock on a Tuesday night. She hung up the phone. She ate the rest of her lunch. She went back to her floor and finished her shift without telling anyone what she had done. At 9:47 that night, I heard footsteps in the hallway, 2 sets. One soft-souled and familiar. One heavier, slightly too fast. The sound of a man trying not to run. The door opened. Marion's voice, barely above a whisper. She can hear you. The heavier footsteps crossed the room and stopped at my bedside. I smelled him before I heard him, concrete dust and cedar soap, the specific combination of a man who had driven 40 minutes without stopping to change. It undid something I had been holding together for 5 days. My throat tightened. My eyes burned behind their sealed lids. He knelt. I felt his knees hit the floor. His hand, rough, large, warm from running across the parking lot, wrapped around my left hand and held on. I'm here, his voice cracked in the middle. I'm here, Clara, I'm not leaving. I squeezed his hand. One squeeze. The hardest squeeze I had managed since I woke up. I heard him exhale, a shaking, uneven breath. Then silence. The kind of silence that happens when someone is crying without making a sound, jaw clenched, shoulders trembling, tears falling on hospital sheets without permission. Marion gave him a minute. Then she pulled her chair close. I need to tell you what's been happening. She told him everything. The power of attorney, the visitor restrictions, the court order being filed for tonight, the forged directive she suspected but had not yet confirmed, the 72-hour protocol and Renata's attempt to root around it through a judge. She told him about the notebook. Grant listened. I felt his hand tighten around mine as each piece landed. When Marion finished, the room was quiet. Then Marcus said, "What do we do?" "You call a lawyer," Marion said, "tonight, one who knows trusts and estates, and then you call the police." Marcus did not let go of my hand for the rest of the night. Marcus called the attorney at 6:30 Wednesday morning. He made the call from his truck in the hospital parking lot, engine off, windows down, the pre-dawn air carrying the smell of cut grass and wet concrete. The attorney's name was Leonard Falk. He was 68, semi-retired, and had drafted my father's trust 14 years ago. He answered on the third ring with his full name, the way people of his generation answered phones, as though the call might be important and deserved proper acknowledgement. Marcus told him everything. Falk confirmed the trust. $4,200,000. Distribution date, Thursday at 12:01 in the morning. If Clara died before distribution, the trust reverted to Douglas Voss's estate. Renata Voss, as sole heir of that estate, received everything. If your wife is alive at midnight tonight, Falk said, the trust distributes automatically. Mrs. Voss gets nothing. She's alive, Marcus said, and she's awake. A pause. Then we have work to do, Falk said. He called Detective Aldrin at the county sheriff's office. Aldrin was 51, methodical, the kind of investigator who wrote everything down and made decisions the way you make decisions when the cost of error is permanent. He wanted evidence. Marion provided it. Her notebook, 23 Years of Habit, contained time-stamped entries covering every shift since Clara was admitted. Visitor arrivals and departures. Conversations overheard through doors left ajar. The visitor restriction. The claim that Marcus was overseas. The urgent push for withdrawal. Each entry dated, timed, written in the same tight, careful handwriting that had been recording the same kind of details since she was 24 years old on her first hospital floor. She faxed 18 pages from the nurse's station at 11 that night. The machine hummed and clicked, and the pages came out in the order she had written them, every timestamp intact. Marion had not known she was building a case. She was doing what she had always done, watching the things other people walked past and writing them down. The same thing she did every shift since her first year on the floor. The same thing nobody had ever thanked her for because it had never before been the difference between someone living and dying. Until now. The forged directive. Aldrin obtained a copy of the healthcare document Renata had provided to the hospital at intake. He also obtained the original from my father's estate attorney. The version filed 6 years ago when I was 23 and unmarried, and had signed 3 pages without reading past the first. They did not match. The original document was 3 pages. Standard scope, treatment decisions, medication approvals, hospital transfers. Nowhere in the original was there any authorization for withdrawal of life-sustaining measures. The version Renata had given the hospital had 4 pages. The 4th contained a specific clause authorizing withdrawal of mechanical ventilation if the patient was determined to be in a persistent vegetative state. My signature was at the bottom. Aldrin's forensic analyst identified it as a digital transfer, a scanned copy of my signature from the original document placed onto the forged page. The ink density was uniform in a way that a hand-signed signature never is. Under magnification, it was unambiguous. Renata had added a page that gave her permission to end my life and signed it with my own name. Dr. Hale, when contacted by Aldrin under subpoena, confirmed that my brain activity had shown consistent improvement since admission, consistent with a patient regaining consciousness, not declining. He had not known what Renata had been telling the family. He had not known about the altered directive. He provided the full medical record and agreed to testify. Falk called Marcus at 11:30 Wednesday night. We have enough, he said. Break tampering, attempted murder. The withdrawal plan, conspiracy. The forged directive, fraud. We can arrest in the morning. Morning, Marcus's voice sharpened. She has a court order, she's coming tonight. The order won't be granted. I've contacted the judge's clerk directly. But if we move tonight, we lose the documentation of the court order attempt as additional evidence. We need her to walk into that room with it. Marcus did not like it, But he understood it the same way he understood construction. You don't pour until the forms are set. Rushing the timeline costs more than waiting costs. He agreed. He sat in the vinyl chair beside my bed and held my hand and did not sleep. Wednesday night, 9:53. Renata and Nadia came in together. After visiting hours, Renata had used the healthcare directive to obtain after-hours access, which she had done every night since my admission. I heard her heels before the door opened, 3 clicks on the linoleum, then the softer fall of Nadia's steps behind her. They whispered, not out of concern for me, out of habit. When you are planning something you should not be planning, your voice drops whether or not anyone can hear you. Reinhardt says the order will be ready by 11, Renata said. We go to Dr. Hale directly. He has to comply once the judge signs. Nadia's voice was thin, and if something goes wrong. Nothing is going to go wrong. Renata's voice carried the specific flatness of a woman who has run the calculation too many times to find any variable she has not accounted for. By midnight, she's gone. Thursday morning, the trust distributes to the estate. By the time anyone asks questions, the medical record shows a patient in a persistent vegetative state whose designated proxy authorized withdrawal per a valid directive. I lay still. Sweat along the back of my neck. Heart rate 4 seconds, 4 seconds, 4 seconds. Controlled, even measured, every involuntary response I had managed to regulate over 5 days of practice. If you have ever had to lie still while someone planned your death 3 feet from your face, you already know what it costs. Every nerve, every muscle, everything in the human body built to protect itself, all of it screaming the same word. Move. The part that had kept me alive for 5 days said the same thing it always said. Not yet. Nadia moved close. I felt the warmth of her presence beside the bed, the vanilla oat milk perfume, the sound of her breathing, uneven, wet, the breathing of someone who has been crying and has not finished. Mom, she said quietly, what if she can hear us? She can't. Renata did not pause. The neurologist confirmed it. She's not coming back. Nadia did not argue, but she did not move away either. She stood there for a long time. Then the door opened. Not Renata, not Dr. Hale. A man in a dark jacket who stepped into the room with the specific unhurried authority of someone who has done this before and does not need to announce himself to be understood. Mrs. Renata Voss. Renata turned. Detective Aldrin, County Sheriff's Office. I opened my eyes. The light was white and total, fluorescent, blinding after 5 days of sealed dark. I blinked once. Twice. The room resolved slowly, the monitors, the IV stand, the window with morning light beginning at its edges, the door open to the hallway. And Renata, standing at the foot of my bed, court order in one hand, manila folder in the other, mouth open with no sound coming out. I looked at her. I did not speak. I did not need to. 5 days of silence, and everything I had to say was already in my eyes. The room held everything in a single suspended moment. Renata at the foot of the bed, the court order in her right hand, the manila folder in her left, her mouth open and no sound coming out. Nadia behind her, one hand pressed flat against the wall as though the wall might hold her upright. Detective Aldrin beside the door, steady and unhurried, the way people are steady when they have been waiting for this specific moment, and it has arrived exactly as planned. And me, eyes open, breathing the room's air for the first time in 5 days without the ventilator's assistance. They had removed it 2 hours earlier, quietly, while Renata was still at the courthouse. My vision adjusting from the blue-green dark of the monitors to the full white of the overhead fluorescence. I looked at Renata. She looked at me. Neither of us blinked. Then Aldrin stepped forward. Renata Voss, you are under arrest for attempted murder, conspiracy to commit murder, and fraud. He said it in the same measured voice he used for everything, not theatrical, not satisfied, simply the voice of a man delivering information that had been earned through evidence rather than assumption. You have the right to remain silent. Renata did not move, not for 3 full seconds. I watched her face make the calculation it had been making for months, running the variables, searching for the exit, and find nothing. The sport coat she was wearing suddenly looked like it belonged to someone else. The manila folder hung in her hand like something she had forgotten she was holding. A second officer stepped forward and took her arm. Gently, professionally. The court order fell from her fingers. It landed on the linoleum face up, the judge's signature visible from where I lay, the document she had obtained to end my life becoming instead the final piece of evidence that ended her freedom. She let them lead her out. She did not look at me again. Nadia collapsed into the vinyl chair. Not gently, she simply folded, the way a person folds when the structure holding them upright has been removed without warning. She put her face in her hands. The crying was loud, gulping, shaking the chair, shaking her whole body. Not performance, not strategy. The crying of someone who had been somewhere they should not have been and had known it the entire time and had not found their way out before it was too late. I looked at her for a moment, then I looked away. Marcus appeared in the doorway. Same work boots from Tuesday night. Concrete dust still in the cuffs of his jeans. He crossed the room in 4 steps and crouched beside the bed and took my hand and pressed his forehead against the side of my head and said nothing at all, which was exactly right. Marion stood by the door in yesterday's scrubs. Off shift, still there. Dr. Hale came last, his expression the careful blank of a man who has just learned what the family he was deferring to had actually been planning. He looked at me with the particular look of a physician recalibrating. Not guilt exactly, but the close cousin of it. The expression of someone who had been given false information and had made decisions accordingly, and was now understanding the full weight of that sequence. "Mrs. Voss," he said, "how are you feeling?" My throat was raw. The ventilator tube had done something to my vocal cords that would take weeks to fully resolve, and every word felt like swallowing broken glass. But the room was quiet enough. "Tired," I said. My voice was barely audible, gravel and air with very little in between. Marcus made a sound I had never heard from him before, a short, rough exhale, the sound of a man who has been holding his breath for 5 days and has finally been given permission to stop. 2 hours later, Leonard Falk walked into room 412, carrying a leather briefcase and a white envelope with my name on the front. He was 68, thin, wire-rimmed glasses, the posture of someone who had spent 5 decades reading documents and had made his peace with it. He set the briefcase on the rolling table, opened it with 2 precise clicks, and pulled out a folder, white, blue tab marked Voss Trust. He looked at me over the top of his glasses. "Happy birthday, Clara." He said it without sentiment, the way a notary stamps a document, a fact, not a greeting. Marcus was in the chair beside me, his hand around mine the way it had been since the police left. Marion was by the door. She had refused to go home until Falk arrived, though her shift had ended 9 hours ago. As of 12:01 this morning, Falk said, reading from the trust instrument with the measured precision of a man who understood that every word of a legal document is there for a reason, the Douglas R. Voss Irrevocable Trust has fully vested in the sole beneficiary, Clara Lauren Voss. Total value, as of the most recent quarterly statement, $4,217,000. He looked up. "It's yours, all of it. No conditions, no contingencies. Mrs. Renata Voss has no claim." He paused. "Your father included a provision in the trust terms that would have disqualified her even without the criminal charges." He called it the conduct clause. His attorney described it to me as the clearest language she had seen in 30 years of estate law. I stared at the folder on the rolling table. "Your father, Falk said quietly, thought of everything. My throat ached. The words came slowly, each one costing something, but the room was still enough to hold them. Thank you, I said. And then I looked past Falk to the door where Marion stood with her arms crossed, and her eyes bright in the way that a woman like Marion would blink away before anyone made a point of noticing. Both of you, I said. Marion nodded once. Small, precise. The nod of a woman who does not require acknowledgement but accepts it when it is genuine. For the record, she said, turning for the door, her voice carrying the specific dry warmth of someone who has been a nurse for 23 years and has stopped being surprised by almost everything. Your vitals were never as flat as they told me. Her sneakers squeaked down the hallway. The sound faded, then it was gone. Marcus brought my hand to his mouth and held it there, not speaking, not needing to. The morning light was coming through the window now, proper morning light, the kind that arrives after you have been through a long night and arrives anyway, indifferent to what the night contained, simply present and warm and entirely itself. I was 30 years old. I was alive. The basil plant on the kitchen windowsill at home had not been watered in 6 days. I thought about that in the specific way you think about small, ordinary things after large, extraordinary ones, with the particular gratitude of someone who understands, for the first time fully, that small, ordinary things are exactly what a life is made of. I was going to water it when I got home. I was going to water it and pinch back the leggy stems and stand at the kitchen window in Marcus's old sweatshirt and let the morning be ordinary. I had earned ordinary. I intended to keep it. Recovery took longer than the crisis. 3 weeks in the hospital. 2 months of physical therapy at a clinic on Sycamore Street, where the waiting room smelled like lemon disinfectant, and someone had taped motivational posters to every available surface with the optimistic density of a person who believed the right words at eye level could carry a person through anything. Sometimes they helped. Mostly I just looked at them while I practiced walking in a straight line without holding the wall. My legs came back first, shaky, unreliable, the legs of someone learning to trust a floor that had recently demonstrated its willingness to disappear. My voice took longer. The vocal cords had been strained by 5 days of the ventilator tube, and for weeks I sounded like I had gargled concrete dust. Marcus said he did not mind. He said he would listen to me read the phone book if it meant I was talking. I believed him. He had sat in a vinyl chair for 11 hours without letting go of my hand. Phone book reading was not much to ask after that. The physical recovery had a shape to it, incremental, documentable, the kind of progress you can measure in degrees and distances, and the specific moment you no longer need to hold the wall. The other recovery did not have that shape. It did not have milestones or discharge criteria. It simply happened slowly in the spaces between the measurable things, in the ordinary Tuesdays when Marcus called at noon and I was sitting at my desk, and the call was just a call. Renata's case moved through the system the way these things move, slowly, methodically, with a great deal of paperwork and very little of the dramatic resolution that the movies suggest. The charges were severe. Attempted murder for the brake tampering. The mechanic she had hired gave a full statement within 48 hours of arrest. He had been paid in cash, given specific instructions, told it was a civil matter involving an insurance dispute. He had not asked further questions. He asked many questions now, from a county detention cell, all of them beginning with the word please. Conspiracy to commit murder for the documented plan to withdraw life support before the trust distribution. Fraud for the altered healthcare directive. The forensic analysis was definitive. The digital transfer confirmed. The 4th page identified as added after the original signing. Renata's bail was denied. The judge cited flight risk and severity of charges, which was the polite legal way of saying that a woman who had paid a mechanic to loosen a brake line and forged a medical document with her stepdaughter's name was not a strong candidate for supervised release in the community. She did not look at me in the courtroom on the days I was present. She looked at her attorney. She looked at the judge. She looked at the table. She did not look at me. I did not require her to. Nadia took a plea deal. Conspiracy to commit fraud. Accessory after the fact. Her attorney argued she had been under her mother's influence and had not fully understood the extent of the plan, which was partially true in the specific way that things are partially true when someone has been given every opportunity to understand something and has chosen not to press. She cooperated fully. She provided text messages, confirmed the timeline, testified about conversations I had already heard from my hospital bed. The judge gave her 2 to 3 years. She wrote me a letter from county detention. 4 pages, yellow legal pad handwritten. She apologized. She explained the student loans, her mother's medical bills, the feeling of watching Douglas's money designated for someone else while they clipped Sunday coupons with kitchen scissors. She said she was sorry in 7 different ways across 4 pages, each version arriving at the same destination from a slightly different angle. I read every word. I did not write back. Not from anger, though the anger had been real, had been present for weeks the way a bruise is present, tender when you press it. I did not write back because some things cannot be repaired by letter any more than a car can be fixed by apology. The damage was structural. The axle was cracked. You do not tape a cracked axle. You simply do not get back in the car. The house Douglas had left Renata was subject to forfeiture proceedings once the conviction was confirmed. The court determined the bequest had preceded the criminal conspiracy, but that proceeds of the estate could not benefit someone convicted of crimes against the estate's intended beneficiaries. I sold the house. I added the proceeds to the trust. My mother's money, my father's house, all of it finally where it had been intended to go. Some things take longer to arrive at their destination than they should. They arrive eventually. 6 months after the hospital, I was sitting at my desk in the spare bedroom. Same desk, same window, same view of the backyard where the oak tree Marcus had planted 2 summers ago was beginning to show the first signs of establishing itself. Not large yet, not impressive, but rooted, committed to the ground, doing the slow, invisible work that trees do before they become the kind of thing worth noticing. The graphic design project on my screen was for a small bakery in Callaway that wanted a logo. Something warm, they had said, something with flour and light in it. I was on my 3rd draft and none of them felt right yet. I was not frustrated. I was simply working. Working felt like breathing, automatic, ordinary, entirely precious in the specific way that ordinary things become precious once you have understood what their absence looks like. My phone rang at noon, Tuesday. Hey, Marcus's voice. Calm, steady, the voice of a man calling from a lunch break with concrete dust on his sleeves and a gas station sandwich in his other hand. Hey, my voice, completely returned now. No longer gravel, just my voice. How's the logo? Still flowerless. He laughed, the laugh that still surprised him every time it happened. Want me to bring anything home? Just you. Deal. I hung up and looked out the window. On the kitchen sill, visible through the doorway, the basil plant sat in its terracotta pot. I had repotted it in August after the old one cracked in a heat wave. The new pot was slightly larger, room to grow. The basil had taken to it immediately, the way living things do when you give them more space than they have been given before. I got up from the desk. I walked to the kitchen. I cut 3 leaves with the small scissors I kept in the drawer, set them on the cutting board, and stood at the window for a moment. The same window, the same morning light, the same view of the back fence where the neighbor's garden ran up against ours. 6 months ago, I had been standing at this window pouring half a cup of water into a terracotta pot with a leggy basil plant, and my biggest concern was whether to pinch back the stems. Then the phone rang, and I said yes, and drove up a mountain road that someone had quietly made fatal. The basil had survived. I had survived. The pot was larger now. The roots had more room. Neither of us was the same plant we had been in that last ordinary morning, but we were both still here, both still growing, both still doing the quiet, unremarkable work of being alive on a Tuesday in a kitchen that smelled like basil and cedar soap and everything worth coming home to. I picked up a leaf and pressed it between my fingers. The smell rose immediately, that clean, specific green smell that means exactly what it is and nothing else. Outside the window, Marcus's oak tree held its ground in the corner of the yard. Still small, getting larger. Some things take time. That was all right. I had time now. 1 year later, I went back to the hospital. Not as a patient. I walked through the east entrance, the same entrance Marcus had used on that Tuesday night, concrete dust in his cuffs, trying not to run, and took the elevator to the 4th floor. The hallway was the same. The linoleum, the muffled intercom, the particular hum of machines behind closed doors, the smell of betadine and floor wax that I had learned from the inside out. It was 10 o'clock, Marion's shift. I waited by the stairwell, with a white box tied with a simple ribbon. Inside the box were a pair of nursing shoes. Good ones, memory foam insoles, reinforced arch support, the kind that cost more than they should and are worth every cent to a person who stands on linoleum for 12 hours at a stretch. I had looked up what nurses wanted. The answer, apparently, was always better shoes. It seemed insufficient. It was also exactly right. Marion came around the corner at 10:12. Scrubs, stethoscope, notebook in her scrub pocket. She saw me and stopped. "Clara." She said my name the way she had said it in the dark of room 412, as confirmation. A diagnosis confirmed. "Hi, Marion." She looked at the box, then at me. Then she took it, opened the lid, lifted one shoe and turned it in the fluorescent light the way she turned everything, carefully, completely, with the full attention of someone who has spent 23 years noticing what other people walk past. "You didn't have to," she said. "You didn't have to squeeze my hand at 2 in the morning. I paused, but you did." She looked at the shoe for another moment. Then she put it back in the box and tucked the box under her arm with the same efficiency she brought to everything. She was already thinking about her next patient. I could see it in the slight shift of her attention. The box accepted, the gesture received, her mind already moving down the hallway toward the work waiting for her. We hugged. Short, tight, the hug of two people who know that anything longer would require a conversation neither of them is quite ready to have in a hospital hallway at 10 o'clock at night. The kind of hug that says everything it needs to say in the duration of it. "Get out of here," she said, but she was smiling. "I have patience." I walked back down the hallway, past room 412, someone else's room now, someone else's monitors, someone else's fight, through the east entrance into the parking lot. I sat in my car for a while with the engine off and the windows down. The night air smelled like cut grass and the first edge of autumn. The parking lot was quiet, a few cars, a distant ambulance bay, the yellow glow of the entrance lights falling across the pavement in rectangular pools. I thought about what Marion had written in her notebook the night of the finger flex. 2:14 a.m. responsive finger flex, left hand. Voluntary. 2 instances. Patient may have awareness. 7 words at the end. Patient may have awareness. Not patient is aware. Not patient is conscious. May have. The careful, evidence-based language of a woman who had spent 23 years understanding the difference between what she observed and what she could prove, and who had understood in that moment that the gap between those two things was where everything important lived. She had not reported it immediately. She had waited for more evidence because she knew that reporting it to the wrong person, to anyone who might mention it to Renata, would have ended whatever advantage I had before it could be used. She had understood the stakes from a single finger flex, and a stepmother who talked about withdrawal with the urgency of someone who had a reason beyond grief. 23 years of watching things that did not add up. She had not known she was building a case. She had just been doing her job. Driving home, I thought about the things I had understood in the year since the hospital. Not the legal things, those had their own timeline, their own resolution. The other things. The things that arrive slowly in ordinary moments when you are standing at a kitchen window or sitting at a desk on a Tuesday afternoon, and the understanding comes without being summoned. I understood that my father had built the trust with exactly this kind of contingency in mind. Not Renata specifically. He had loved Renata, had trusted her, had believed she was the person she had presented herself to be across 11 years of soup and medication schedules and oncology appointments. But he had understood human nature well enough to build walls regardless. He had understood that love and money occupy the same space imperfectly, and that the most important arrangements are the ones made before they are needed. The conduct clause, the specific language his attorney had described as the clearest she had seen in 30 years of practice. He had thought of everything. I understood that Nadia was not a villain in the way that satisfying stories require villains. She was a 26-year-old woman who had watched her mother build a life around a dying man and receive, at the end of it, a house and a deficit and a trust she could not touch. She had known what was being planned and had not stopped it, which was its own kind of choice. But the crying in room 412 had been real. The 4-page letter from county detention had been real. Some people make the wrong choice in the wrong direction for reasons that are genuinely comprehensible and remain the wrong choice regardless. Understanding someone is not the same as forgiving them. My grandmother would have said that. So would my father. I understood that Marion Salas had saved my life with 3 things: a notebook she kept out of habit, a squeeze she gave out of instinct, and a phone call she made during a 12-minute lunch break from a landline in a break room. No surgery, no dramatic intervention, no moment that would read as heroic from the outside. Just a woman doing her job with complete attention, and then doing slightly more than her job when complete attention told her something was wrong. That was the whole of it. I turned onto our street. The porch light was on. Marcus always left the porch light on when I was out after dark, had done it since we moved in, one of those small habitual kindnesses that accumulates into the specific texture of a life built with someone. I parked in the driveway. I sat for a moment. Through the kitchen window, I could see the basil plant on the sill. Even from the driveway, in the warm interior light, it had the look of something that had decided to stay. The stems fuller than they had been, the leaves catching the light from inside, the whole plant larger than it had been in the spring when I repotted it into the bigger terracotta. I thought about that Saturday morning, standing at the window in Marcus's sweatshirt, pouring half a cup of water into that pot. The leggy stems I had been meaning to pinch back for weeks. The phone ringing at 7:15. Renata's cheerful voice. Wouldn't it be nice? Just the girls, and the yes I had said because guilt makes you say yes to things that sound like repair. I thought about the last thought before the windshield went white. I didn't water my basil plant this morning. I had been worried about the basil, as though the basil were the thing at risk, as though the basil were the thing that needed protecting on that Saturday morning. It turned out we had both needed protecting. It turned out neither of us had known it. I got out of the car. I walked up the path. The night air was cool and clear, carrying the specific smell of early autumn in coastal Oregon, salt and pine and something green underneath, the smell of a coast that continues its work regardless of what happens inland. I unlocked the front door. The house was warm and lit and smelled like the dinner Marcus had made, something with garlic and rosemary, something that meant someone had been home before me, and had decided that home should smell like food when I arrived. I set my keys on the table by the door. I walked to the kitchen. I looked at the basil plant on the sill. 1 year ago, I had left it unwatered on a Saturday morning and driven up a mountain road and not come back for 6 days. The plant had survived. Connie from next door had watered it when she came to feed the cat, not knowing it was the thing I had been thinking about when the windshield went white. It was still here, still growing. I pinched back a leggy stem, the one on the left side that had been reaching toward the window at an angle that would eventually make the whole plant lopsided. A small, necessary correction, the kind that keeps something growing in the direction it was meant to grow. The smell of basil rose immediately, sharp and clean and green. There it is, I thought. Still here, still growing. So was I. There is a thing that happens when you survive something that was designed to end you. Not immediately. Not in the hospital room with the fluorescent light and the court order on the floor and Renata being led out by her arm. Not in the weeks of physical therapy or the months of legal proceedings. Later, quietly, in ordinary moments that arrive without announcement and carry, underneath their ordinariness, the full weight of what they almost were not. Standing at a kitchen window on a Tuesday morning, cutting basil leaves with small scissors, hearing a phone ring at noon. It has been 18 months since room 412. I am sitting at my desk in the spare bedroom, same desk, same window, same view of the backyard where Marcus's oak tree has grown visibly since last autumn. Not large yet, not the tree it will eventually be, but established now, committed to the ground, doing the slow work that trees do before anyone thinks to notice them. The bakery logo is finished. It went through 6 drafts before it felt right, something warm, something with light in it, flour and morning and the specific golden color of bread just out of the oven. The client cried when she saw it, which is the best possible response to a logo. I am working on something new, not a client project. The record. I started writing it 4 months ago, in a notebook I bought at the drugstore on Elm, blue cover, spiral bound. A pen that writes in the same blue-black ink my father used for everything important. I did not plan it. I simply found myself one evening with the notebook open, and the pen in my hand, and the understanding that some things need to be written down before the person who lived them loses the specific texture of what it felt like from inside. The record is not about Renata. It is not about the trust or the court order or the 4 forged words at the bottom of a 4th page that was never part of what I signed. It is about the other things, the ones that do not appear in court documents. The smell of iodine and floor wax, and something floral that did not belong. The specific weight of a ventilator breath, air forced into your chest in a rhythm you did not choose, a rhythm that is keeping you alive and that you would give anything to stop. The sound of 4 seconds between monitor beeps and what it costs to keep them at 4 seconds when every nerve in your body wants to spike them. The temperature of Marion's hands at 11:47 at night. Warm, dry, betadine soap. The most trustworthy hands I had encountered in my life up to that moment. The feeling of Marcus's knees hitting the linoleum floor beside my bed and his hand closing around mine and those 4 words, I'm here. I'm not leaving, which were the truest thing anyone has ever said in my presence. I am writing it down because it happened, and because I was there, and because the specific, granular truth of what it is like to lie still, while someone plans your death 3 feet from your face, is not something that exists in any record I have seen. Marion's notebook is the only document that comes close. 18 pages of timestamps and observations, tight, careful handwriting, 23 years of habit applied to 6 days that needed it more than any shift she had ever worked. She did not know she was building a case. She was just doing what she had always done. I am doing the same thing, in my own way, in a blue notebook on a desk in a spare bedroom in coastal Oregon. There are things I understand now that I did not understand the morning Renata called, and I said yes. I understand that a healthcare directive is not a formality. It is a document that gives a person legal authority over whether you live or die, and it should be read, all of it, every page, with the same attention you would give to a contract you were signing with someone you did not entirely trust. Update it when your life changes. Put your spouse on it. Take Renata off it. I understand that the people who hurt us are rarely monsters in the way that satisfying stories require. Renata was not a monster. She was a woman who had spent 11 years caring for a dying man and had watched the money she considered her recompense designated for someone else. She had done a monstrous thing. The distinction matters, not for her sake, but for the accuracy of understanding what we are actually dealing with when something like this happens. I understand that Marion Salas saved my life 3 times. Once when she noticed the finger flex. Once when she did not report it to the wrong person. Once when she called Marcus from a break room landline at 12:15 on a Tuesday. None of those moments were dramatic. None of them required courage in the way that stories about courage usually frame it. They required attention and judgment and the willingness to do slightly more than the job description on a night when slightly more was everything. I have been thinking about that ever since. About what it means to pay attention. About the notebook she kept, and the record I am keeping now, and the specific act of writing things down in the belief that they matter and that someone should be counting. Some people save your life with surgery. Some save it with a phone call. Marion saved mine with a notebook and a squeeze and 23 years of arriving for her shift and doing it completely. That deserves to be written down. So I am writing it down. The thing I think about most, in the 18 months since the hospital, is not Renata. It is not the court order or the break line or the 4-page letter from Nadia on yellow legal pad paper. It is the last thought before the windshield went white. I didn't water my basil plant this morning. I have been trying to understand why that was the thought. Not Marcus. Not any of the large things. The basil plant, leggy in its terracotta pot, the one small task left undone on a Saturday morning that was about to become the last ordinary morning for 6 days. I think it is because the basil plant was what I was in the middle of. Not finishing. Not completing. Simply doing, standing at the window with a half cup of water, present in the specific, unexamined way of a person who has no reason to examine the moment because the moment is just a moment. Water the plant. Go inside. Drive up the mountain. The thought was not about the plant. It was about the interruption. The thing left mid-reach. The ordinary Tuesday that had not been allowed to finish being ordinary. I watered it when I got home. 6 days later, weak and raw-voiced and walking with the careful attention of someone who has recently relearned that floors are trustworthy, I walked to the kitchen window and poured half a cup of water into the pot. The basil was fine. Connie had watered it. The stems were full, the leaves large, the plant indifferent to everything that had happened in its absence. I stood at the window for a long time. The same window, the same morning light, the same view of the back fence. Different person, standing in front of it. Not different in the ways that dramatic stories suggest, not transformed, not reborn, not freed of old burdens by the weight of new ones. Different in a quieter way. The way you are different after you have understood something you cannot ununderstand, after the knowledge has settled into your body and become part of how you move through rooms and answer phones and water plants on Saturday mornings. I know what an ordinary Tuesday is worth. I know what it costs. I know the sound of a monitor at 4-second intervals and what it takes to keep it there. And I know that the most important people in your life are sometimes the ones who show up at 11:47 at night when nobody is watching, who write things down because they have learned that things need to be written down, who notice a finger flex in the dark and understand what it means and know exactly who to call. I called Marion on a Tuesday in September. She picked up on the second ring. "How are you doing?" I asked. "Working," she said. "You?" "Working," I said. A pause, the comfortable kind. "Your vitals were never flat," she said. "I know," I said. "I was counting." She laughed. Short, warm, the laugh of a woman who has heard a great many things in hospital rooms at 2 in the morning and has learned to find the ones worth laughing at. "Keep counting," she said. I hung up. I walked to the kitchen. I stood at the window with my coffee and looked at the basil plant in its larger pot. The stems were full. The leaves were the deep green of something that has been given consistent attention and has responded accordingly. I had been pinching the leggy ones back all summer, the ones that reached at wrong angles, the ones that wanted to go sideways instead of up. Small corrections, regular ones, the kind that keep something growing in the right direction. Outside the window Marcus's oak tree held its ground in the corner of the yard. Taller than last autumn, not tall enough yet to be what it was going to be. Some things take time. That is not a problem with the thing. That is simply what it means to grow, to require more time than you have yet been given, to be smaller than you will eventually be, to hold your ground in the yard and do the slow, invisible work of becoming. I had been doing that work for 18 months. I intended to keep doing it. I set the coffee down. I picked up the pen. I opened the blue notebook to the current page and wrote the date at the top, the same way Marion wrote dates, the same way my father wrote dates, the same careful acknowledgement that the day is specific and that specific days deserve to be marked. Below the date, I wrote the last line of the record. The basil is growing, so am I. Keep counting. I closed the notebook. I capped the pen. I looked out the window at the oak tree and the morning light and the yard that was ours, mine and Marcus's, ordinary and specific and entirely worth the 5 days it had cost to keep it. Then I picked up the coffee. I stood at the window. I let the morning be exactly what it was, unremarkable, unhurried. A Tuesday in September on the Oregon coast with the smell of basil in the kitchen and the sound of the neighbor's dog 2 yards over and Marcus's boots at the front door where he had left them last night when he came home for dinner. Ordinary. Entirely ordinary. The most precious thing I own. If this story has stayed with you, if somewhere across these 10 parts you have recognized a moment where someone paid attention when they did not have to, where a small act in the dark turned out to be the one that mattered, leave me a comment. Tell me their name. Tell me what they noticed that no one else did. I read every single one. And if you want to check your own healthcare directive today, update your emergency contacts, make sure the right person has the right authority, let this be the reason you do it. Do it today. If you want another story, about a woman who discovers her late husband's financial accounts have been quietly drained by someone she trusted completely, and the paper trail that was left behind for exactly this moment, it is waiting in the description below. It begins with a number that does not match. Come with me.